From one of Australia's former leading homicide detectives, this is I Catch Killers with Gary Jubelin.
So that Rose could tell her story.
Yeah.
And she did write a really powerful letter to the court, and she did say, I had a man telling me for a long time that I wasn't allowed to talk and I wasn't allowed to tell my story. Then I went to court and I had men standing in front of me telling me that I had to tell my story. And now you're telling me that I'm allowed to tell my story again. You know, and so...
Sometimes it needs the clarity of a young mind to break down what this is about.
I Catch Killers with Gary Jubelin.
Michelle, welcome back. Part two. It's good to see you smile. Like the subject we're talking about, such a heavy subject, and I think sometimes people are surprised with the nature of the guests that we come on here that we can still sit here and have a laugh. But you've got to be able to laugh through situations like this just to survive.
Yeah.
Is that a fair assessment of it?
It is. And look, I think, I don't know, I just have this determination that we know that the nature of abuse is about power. And the best way to take someone's power back is to just be indifferent to them and to live a good life. Yeah. Yeah, in spite of everything. And I just think that's what we try.
Well, in part one, we got a sense of the impact on you and the shock of this situation evolving where your daughter's come to you and reported that she's been sexually abused and that's impacted on another daughter. We're going to talk about the court system, and in our conversations we had the other day, I got the sense, call me very perceptive, I've got the sense that there was a certain amount of frustrations with the court system, and I think you said something that it's not a justice system. You've worked out courts are not a justice system, it's a legal system. Yeah. I've heard too many victims of crime tell me that exact thing, and I think I share that view. But before we move in to talk about the process, because it took 2.5 years for it to get to court, there was something else that in our conversation that we said that, it impacted on me, just you telling me the story, and it was about, and we clarified before the start of the interview that your daughter's happy for us to talk about it. But Pippa, your daughter, was so affected by it, she's saying that she didn't want to live. Yeah.
And look, that was the first time she mentioned that. She was 10. And she didn't just say, I don't want to be alive anymore. She told me how she wanted things to go. And, you know, as a teacher too, like that's one of the first things when you have a kid say something, you know, oh, do you have a plan? And she did. She had a plan, and she was 10. And, you know, the impact on her mental health was significant. And, you know, it was ongoing. So one of the things that she found really difficult was that with counsellors and things like that, when you're waiting so long to go to court, the sexual assault service is really about they're amazing counsellors. But she had 4 different ones in 2.5 years. So she was sick of people. She already had issues with people leaving her because we'd had, Jen had disappeared from her life. And then she had, you know, these counsellors who were meant to be helping her. She'd develop a rapport with them, and then they'd go on to something else. And, you know, that's not their fault. No. That is not their fault. But we just saw this really steady decline in her mental health and how she was. And she was isolated from friends. You know, there was so much going on for her. So just before we went to court in Sydney, so we were, you know, 2.5 years later, it was the March, I think, it was Easter weekend in 2016, and she had been completely irrational at the shops. We were at Mum and Dad's place in Cootamundra. We'd been at the shops. She wanted to buy something that was just probably what I refer to as Happy Meal, you know, toys, like rubbish. And I said no. And she carried on. It was just completely irrational for the situation. Anyway, I knew we were sort of on a backslide. So we were walking home and we stopped at a corner and she just looked me dead in the eye and she said, she looked behind and then she looked me dead in the eye and said, I'm so sorry, Mum. and she went to run out, and there was a car coming around the corner, and it was just like she was in so much pain. It was just so much pain, and there was part of me that's like, oh, why are we doing this? Like, we shouldn't be putting her through this. And then there was another part of me that knew that her personality is that she would go into that whole of, you know, oh, I didn't go through with this, and that means that nothing happened and nothing changed. And so it was this, we were trying to balance, you know, do we put our kids through this court process or do we not? Never expecting it to be what it was. You know, we had a balcony when we were in Sydney, and she couldn't be on that balcony. Like, we weren't allowed to, she couldn't be out of our sight. It was pretty scary.
I can't even comprehend what you're going through as parents, seeing that your 10-year-old going through that type of trauma. And, yeah. And
even the services, you know, at that time, so as I said, the sexual assault service said this is actually beyond our scope.
Yeah.
Like, this is, and I could completely appreciate that. I worked in wellbeing, and I was, you know, very prepared for them to say that. We went to CAMS, which is the Child and Adolescent Mental Health Unit or Mental Health Service. And, you know, here's this kid she'd just turned 11 at that point, and she was going to CAMS at the same time as there was a drug and alcohol support group there. So she would turn up in a room full of, you know, all of these people who were seeking support for an addiction. It was just, it was just horrific. It was really bad. Look, and she struggled with that for probably the next 5 years till she was about 15, and you know, things went pretty poorly. Pip's really good at describing things, and, you know, I've said, you know, she's a great little writer, and she said this one day, you know, I just feel like I'm down in a hole and I can see everyone up there, but I'm just too tired. I'm too tired. Everything was very weighty. You know, she's at the moment, you know, and for the last few years, she's just, you know, kicking goals. She's doing really well. She does what she needs to do to be, you know, to live a good life. But it has been tricky, and she's been very open in talking about it, and I think that's really important. That she can be like that, and she shares that with people. She shared that as part of her story, you know, when she's been, you know, publicly speaking about her story. And I think that, you know, it shows how strong she is and where she's got to.
Oh, most definitely, most definitely. I think the thing that comes across to me, you're articulating what she's going through, what you're going through as a family, is that it's not just the crime doesn't stop when the offence is stopped. The crime permeates its way through years and years of their life, if not their whole life. The type of impact that this, you know, childhood sexual abuse. The process took 2.5 years to get to court. Now you've made a point to me before that you know, how long is 2.5 years in a young person's life, in a child's life? It would seem like a lifetime. Like,
well, for Rose, it was a third of her life.
A third of her life going through this and trying to get justice. And she's probably confused what even justice is about. It's just stopping this, making this bad man get punished, which would confuse a child. How do you even explain that to a child? But 2.5 years, it just seems like an extraordinary long time to wait for the matter to go to court. So that's from the point that he's charged. Yep. Now, in a country town, not sure of the circumstances, was he still living within the community?
Yep.
So they've been sexually assaulted, he's been charged, and then his life, for all intents and purposes, is going on unimpeded, and their kids trying to make sense of, well, we told you what this horrible man did to us. Why is he still walking the streets? And
we had to put protections in place around them in terms of, if we go to the supermarket and you see Leon, these are the things that you need to do and say. You know, prepare them for all of that. You know, that you didn't think that would ever happen. And fortunately, we didn't ever see him. We didn't ever run into him. And as much as I think it's, it was crap that he was out. It was crap.
Yeah.
How do you live a good life when you're facing those charges? There's part of me that goes, well, you still sort of, he wasn't living a great life. But I did hate that we had to put these things around the girls and, have a bit of a script, I suppose. If we're in Big W and I'm in this section and you've gone to this section and you see him, this is what you have to say.
Yeah.
Even though there were AVOs and things like that in place, to try and it was just another layer. It was just another layer that you had to add.
It's never ending, and you made the point that instead of going to dancing or netball or playing sport in the afternoons, your children were going to see counsellors.
Yep. Yeah.
And then the recall, the kids would come up with more information than would be passed on to the police. It was just never ending.
Yeah. And I do, if I had my time again, I probably would have. I probably would have been more proactive in letting Glenn, as a detective, know. Look, just letting you know this is what's been said.
Yeah.
But no one sort of explains that process, and it's definitely no disrespect to the people who were involved in our case because we had a cracking team.
Yeah.
And I say that because of the way that they engage with us. But you just don't know. I probably could have gone back 7, 8, 9, and multiple times
with
say
additional information that Rose or Pippa has told you, and he did this to me or he did that.
Yeah, but you kind of go, oh well, it's sort of we just know that he did it.
Yeah. And as a parent, you're balancing. Okay, we want justice, we want the person accountable, but you're also looking at how many times are you going to traumatise a court, and seeking justice shouldn't be re-traumatising. No. Tell us about the court experience. Break it right down. But what people don't understand, they think, just go to court. You turn up. They tell you to get there at 10 o'clock, and you'll give your evidence, and it'll all be over. It's nothing like that. You had to come up to Sydney as a family, rent a place.
Well, it was even before that. So we would see his name in the court listing, and Brent would go. Yep. And we had no idea what a mention was. We just didn't know.
I say this cynically. I think a mention is a way for solicitors to get extra money half the time. Because you wonder how many mentions can be on one case.
I think there were over 70 mentions.
Yeah.
It was hideous. And so we'd go and Brent would turn up and do a mention. There was one particular day that he went to the mention.
So I'll just clarify so people do understand what a mention is, that a person has been charged, they're bailed to appear, or they're remanded to appear on a certain date. They turn up, and the mention is, okay, how's the case coming along? Is the brief going to be served? And it just drags on and on.
We need some extra time.
Yeah, the defence, will turn up, and sometimes it's the prosecution. We need some extra time, and so then it gets put back in the list again, time and time again. From people going through the situation you're going through, your life is hinging on what happens at this court matter. Everything that you're doing in life is around what's going to happen in this court matter, and the amount of times.
You can't go anywhere.
Yeah.
You have to stay. You have to be available just in case it becomes more than a mention.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, so Brent was going to them, and eventually we were like, well, what's this mention about? What is that? So it was explained to us exactly what you've just said now. So, we stopped going to that, and then we. So the solicitor who was working the case on behalf of the Crown, and I do say our solicitor, was Nat. And Nat was fabulous, and she was on board sort of from the beginning. She could speed read. I thought that was amazing. She was just she was incredible, and she knew the case inside and out. She was probably the most consistent person from that legal side for us. Obviously, there was Glenn. Glenn called me one day at school to let me know that he'd received a letter from the solicitor, the defendant's solicitor, and I needed to stop telling people what he had done to my children, which I certainly wasn't out there telling the community. It was very targeted, as we talked about earlier. And, so he was saying all this, and I actually was really cranky about that.
I understand why you're really cranky about that, and I get cranky about that. That you're trying to protect kids,
and he was another person in the community that we knew. We were connected to this guy, and
Yeah.
I was like, "Well, you chose to defend him, but you know what I did, Gary? I asked Glenn. I said, how much does it cost for them to send a letter?'
Mm.
And he's like, what do you mean? I said, well, how much does every letter cost? And he said, oh, probably 300, more than that. I said, well, every time he sends a letter, can you reply and have a question at the end? Anyway,
I love that. That's
what?
evil.
I said, if he is found not guilty, at least I will have pleasure in the fact that he's had to pay for it, because they were the biggest tight asses you've ever met. And I was just like, where do you get your wins? That's where you get your wins. Like.
What a brilliant strategy. I like that.
So all that sort of stuff was happening. So we had Nat, and Nat was based in Sydney. We were in Albury. We had the barrister, the Crown barrister, was based in Wagga.
Yep.
His name was Vince, and he was exceptional with the kids, had a really great manner with them. So we did start the case. They did start the trial in Albury.
Yeah.
They started the trial, and I think that was sort of the August. It was nearly 2 years at that point. We went into the courthouse in Albury. We did practices.
Yeah.
Like the girls went in there to show, where the room was, and that was a shit moment. Like for me, I just thought, what am I doing here? Like this is not like year 10 mock trial. That was my last experience of a courthouse.
Yeah, it's intimidating. Isn't
it was,
yeah.
and especially if you're there on a Monday, because there's some interesting characters in the hallways on a Monday, and we so we went in and they did their practices, and then the day that we went, Brent had organised everything with military precision because he likes to, be on time and in control, and this was totally outside of our control.
Yeah.
But he could organise getting the girls into the courthouse without having to see him, So we had friends lined up and helping with that. Anyway, we went in and he was sitting across the aisle. He was sitting across the aisle from us, and I was just thinking, where is the protection? Like, there is nothing. There's nothing here for these kids. So this man who had, spent all this time making them feel horrible was across the aisle, and he was smug. He just sat there and he looked, and it was just yuck. Yeah. Anyway, so it was frightening for the kids. And so my brother actually came along. My brother's 7 years younger than me, and he had lived with us for a period of time and knew these people as well. And he sort of he recognised that the kids were scared, and he sort of kept looking out the window of this room that we're in, and he goes, "Oh, is that him?" And I was like, "Yeah." He's going, "Geez, he looks old." I was like, "Yeah, he does. Yeah, he does." And I could sort of pick up where he's going. And he said, "I reckon he looks a bit fat too." He's like, got old and fat. And I was like, "Yeah, he has." And he's like, "He's just an old fat motherfucker like this."
Yeah.
Anyway, the girls started giggling, and there was, some other people in the room as well at the time. Everyone's sort of giggling. And he was named the motherfucker from there forward. Like, the girls have never used his name. That's what his name is. And it just was enough to make them feel a little bit powerful.
I understand what you're saying there.
Yeah.
And they got control here, they got your support, and we can call this bloke what we want to call him because he doesn't deserve any respect.
Yeah.
I get it. I get it.
So, that was good. And so you take your little wins like that. But unfortunately, for reasons they're too unbelievable, and I really don't think people believe it. We ended up not going through with their case in Albury. They decided it would be best if it was moved to Sydney.
Who decided that?
So there was a bit of backroom banter between the judge and the barristers about a previous case that had been had, and one of the barristers, the defence barrister, he actually was defending a very well-known criminal up here in Sydney later in that week, and so if they started the trial, they wouldn't be able to complete it sort of in that time, and so it was a very good out for the Crown to say, well, let's not start it. Yeah. They felt that it would be better if we didn't have our trial in that place.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. It goes to Sydney. A couple of things about Sydney, and these really hit home to me. You got to move the whole family up here for 4 or 5 weeks. I think the trial.
We thought we were going to be here for 2 weeks.
Yeah, and it drags on and on and on.
Yeah.
The court matter. Your daughters are going in, and you're basically handing them over to people, and you're not allowed into court while they're giving evidence.
No.
One of your daughters was in the witness box for 5 days, or giving evidence for 5 days, and you can't be present while she...
And that was just during the trial, so we had to have the pre-trial.
Yeah.
Because they were trying to get the cases separated.
Yeah.
So... And I don't think people understand that happens a lot, particularly with child sex cases. So and it used to be very frequent, and fortunately the Royal Commission, sort of one of their recommendations is that this is a process that's looked at. But what they used to do is say, well, you can't, even though these girls are sisters, we're trying the case separately because there might have been collusion or concoction or whatever.
Yeah.
So... They did that fancy word, voir dire
voir dire,
one of those. So the trial before the trial.
Yeah.
And again, had no knowledge of what that was. And so we went to, so they came up here and they had to do that first. So essentially both the girls had to listen to all of their evidence and be cross-examined. And myself too, actually. No, I sucked. I was really bad in the pre-trial before they decided to keep the cases together.
Okay, so they've had an application to separate the trials. So he was charged, and probably I should have clarified that earlier. He was charged, I believe, 4 counts with Rose.
I can't remember. Okay, there were a lot.
Okay, there was charges related to Rose and charges related to Pippa.
Yeah.
And they tried to separate the trial. So so we've got the trial. You've had the voir dire where you've got to give evidence, and you go through all the trauma associated with a normal trial anyway. But it's a sake for legal argument to determine they're going to be heard together. Then you've got to go through it again. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think one of your children was giving evidence and had to give evidence again because a jury member fell asleep.
Yep.
Yeah, and you can't make this stuff up. And this happens. Things happen, but
it was interesting. My younger sister, she's fierce, and she was with the girls. She was supporting the girls just outside the room because we weren't able to be there. And when she came down after, we didn't know what had happened. We just knew that they were going to have to impanel a new jury.
Yep.
And she came down in the lift, at the back of the Downing Centre there, and Rose runs out of the lift and jumps, and Brent catches her I haven't just been sitting and listening to she just had this beautiful way about her. But what we didn't realise is that another lift had come down at the same time, opened up, and these people sort of walked out and stopped.
Yep.
And they sort of all ran into one another. It was one of those moments.
Awkward. Yep.
And I looked over and Anna looked at them and she gave them this look. Like my sister, she gave them this look. I'm like, oh my goodness, what's going on here? And she said, get her out of here. Get her out of here. And I was like, what are you talking about? And she goes, one of those motherfuckers just fell asleep and we got to start over. We didn't know.
Yeah.
We didn't know. A couple of those jury members were actually quite teary, particularly when they saw that interaction, I think, between Bren and Rose, realising she was just a little girl.
Yeah.
Yeah. And because they'd already heard everything, so they knew what the case was about. So they would have,
And the trauma, you said to me the other day when we were talking that how angry you were at the judge and...
Yeah. So we, as I said, so we did that, and I think that was a few days. I think it was 4 or 5 days. And there was also they tried to get a ruling that I couldn't say how I found out about what had happened to the girls, like how it was presented to me. They didn't want me to be able to say the words. And the words are very impactful.
Yeah, like the first report of this is when your 5-year-old daughter jumps in the bed and tells you what she told you, that I don't like Leon licking my vagina. They argued to exclude that.
Yep.
I look at the weight of evidence that comes across with that, and I just get frustrated with the court system sometimes. Like,
it's almost like, it hurts our ears to hear that.
Yeah.
Like, anyway, fortunately, they did say that we could use that I could, because it would provide a context, right?
Yeah. Okay. And the point that we were talking about was your anger and frustration that the judge and the defence on how your children were treated.
So we had... as I said, there were multiple days. So Rose had to listen to her evidence 3 times and then answer questions. They have a witness support person.
Yep.
So they met that witness support person during the process. We had our... there was the lady from SAS, from a Sexual Assault Service in Albury, came up with us. But because the trial went for so long, the funding ran out for her to be there. So she was actually only there. She wasn't really there while they actually gave evidence.
Right, she was there in the lead up. But
and we also had Maggie, who was giving evidence as well, because she had been a witness to a number of things. Yeah. So Rose had done this every time the Crown prosecutor, is that what I say?
Yeah.
Him. Every time he objected to something, it was overruled. Yep. He did not get for the whole trial. Yep. Not one. Rose was being told she was a liar. She goes, they called me a liar. All these things, the language that was used.
How old's Rose at this stage?
She's 7.5.
7.5.
Yeah.
In a witness box at court, being called a liar.
Yep, you're a liar. And
the prosecutor objected to that and overruled.
Yeah. And the whole thing, it just went like that. It was so horrible, and it was so outside anything that I believed could happen. I felt stupid. I did. I was like, I can't believe they can do this. And every time I looked at that man, the defence barrister, I had zero respect for him. I could not respect him. He was short too. Anyway, so Rose did that, and then Pip was on for days, and she couldn't speak by the end.
That traumatised by?
She could not speak. She ended up actually with really bad tonsillitis. We had to get a doctor to come to the hotel. She got really, really bad tonsillitis. And, there were things that happened, like, so Janine, who was our witness support person, they asked Rose, 7.5-year-old Rose, who has since been diagnosed with dyslexia, asked her to read from a page on her statement, and she couldn't find it. And Janine turned the page to get it for her, and she was dismissed because she was helping the witness. So the one person that they had a connection with was dismissed because she was helping the witness. Natalie, the solicitor who I was talking about, she came out of the courtroom one day. Brent's sitting there. Pip's been on the stand for a couple of days at this point. And she came out really quickly and she said, I've got to go around the back and talk to Pip. And Brent was like, is she okay? And she said, no, she's not okay. And Brent said, well, like, what do we do? And she said, I don't know. She goes, I'm just going to talk to her. She just needs to answer the questions. If the answer's yes, she says yes. If it's no, she says no. If it's I don't know, she says I don't know. That's all she has to do. She's really upset. And then she rushed off. Well, the defendant's family heard that interaction. Natalie got booted. And had to do training because of it. Like, it impacted on her career.
Technically, you're not allowed to tell someone what a person in the witness box is saying.
No.
But we're talking about a young girl, traumatised young girl, and that it's just.
And she wasn't saying what she was saying. She was just saying she wasn't saying anything. And the judge actually ruled, well, no, because she used the word if. She didn't give that. She didn't give the answers to the question. She said if, and also she didn't, say what any. But what happened, and I didn't realise this at the time. I was at the motel. Pip's out the back of the courthouse, waiting to go in. No one knew this was going on, because the next morning, there was this, and Nat was sort of sitting there, and Brent went to talk to her, and she was like, no, like, I can't talk to you. And then they all got called as witnesses in this sideshow that was happening while Pip's sitting in the back waiting. Anyway, and then Brent wasn't allowed to talk to Pip. Like, it was just all this. It was just absolute rubbish. And I ended up on the Friday, so she'd gone all week, and on the Friday, they said, look, they're trying to get the charges dropped. They're saying that Pip's not answering enough questions. And I said, all right, no worries. I said, well, Glenn, I want you to go in there right now, and I want them charged with the emotional abuse of my daughter. And he sort of looked at me, and he's like, I would if I could. And I said, that's what they're doing. That's what they're doing in there. They're abusing my children. Anyway, obviously that didn't happen. So that happened. I actually then went back to our motel, and my cousin, we had 22 people in and out of that courtroom the whole time we were there. We were so well supported. And when I say in and out, no one was in there with the kids. They all sat outside with us. But I went home and did a chronology of what had happened since we'd arrived in Sydney. So we were up to the end of week 3, I think, at that point. And I just said that if the charges were dropped, I was happy to go trial by media. I'm fine with that. And I'd actually been in contact with somebody from the media during the week. And anyway, so that sort of, I don't know if that prompted anything, but I think, everything got a bit faster after that.
They don't like to be accountable. And look, I don't want you to feed into my anger about some things I see at court, but what you've just described there, I from a parent's point of view, I can't even comprehend the anger and the frustration you must feel when we haven't done anything wrong. My daughters certainly haven't done anything wrong. Why are we being treated like that? And it's all very well, and I know this sounds very opinionated, but it's all very well when these defence barristers saying, well, everyone's got a right to a defence and all that, but there's a way in which you can defend people. I agree, everyone does have a right to defence, but there's a way in which you can defend people, so their legal rights are met.
I think it took its toll on him, the defence barrister. I watched his demeanour change over that period of time. But he still went there with the intention to break the children. That was the quickest way to get the case to be done.
We're talking kids. We're not talking adults in there or beating up on a police officer or someone in the witness box. We're talking about kids that have come forward to the court because they've been sexually assaulted. It needs protection. And okay, I'm angry. You're angry and upset, understandably, but you actually did something, like the advocacy from it. And we're going to move into that because I think it's very significant, the things that flowed on from your anger, and I'm sure other people's angers and frustrations of the system that's just not set up to support children.
That's it.
No circumstances. So he was convicted.
Yep. Only of what he did to Pip.
Do you know, or can I ask you, and you're again only speculating, I suppose, on why he wasn't convicted of what happened with Rose?
So I know that there was a question that came back from the jury during that, when they were deliberating, and the question was if it mattered if she got the time wrong, like, if the time frame wasn't right, but she'd said what had happened, did that matter if they were sure that it had happened? And the judge said that that was reasonable doubt. That's hard. Like, it's hard. And I think Rose has found that harder as she's got older she didn't know until we did the Justice Shouldn't Hurt, which we'll talk about.
Yeah.
She didn't know that he wasn't convicted
Yeah.
for charges on her. So when we did the victim impact statement, we did one for Pip and we did one for her too, even though we didn't
get it read out in court.
I just wanted her to know that it mattered. Yeah. Yeah.
When the guilty verdict came down, how did you feel personally, and how did the family feel?
That was a weird day. This is my question that I asked you a couple of years ago.
All right, yeah.
Because we went to your show at the Enmore Theatre, and my question for you was, how do you balance the elation of a guilty verdict with the feelings of the family when nothing's changed?
Yeah.
So we were at home and the girls were at school. The girls had gone back to school. My uncle and my cousin stayed up. Well, they lived in Sydney, so they went. We came home. Brent went up the first day, and then nothing happened, so he came back home. And they were at the courthouse, and I got the phone call from my uncle to say he's been found guilty of 7 out of 8 charges.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay. And then I was thinking, where's Brent? Like, he was picking the girls up from school, and I didn't know, where he was or where he would be. I was worried that it would be not guilty and he'd be picking the girls up from school, because I did worry how he would cope with that. Anyway, so that happened, and then my cousin then rang me. He stayed in for the whole thing, and he got bail. Yeah. He was found guilty of child sex offences and he got bail. So he was allowed to walk out of the courthouse that day. Anyway, a lot of our friends came over, the people who'd been supporting us during the trial for the years preceding. Glenn, the detective, came over, and a couple of people bought bottles of champagne. And I was sitting at the table, and everyone was kind of jovial, and I do not begrudge anyone of that at all. Yeah. I had to leave.
Yeah.
I couldn't sit there. Yep. It just confirmed what I knew already. So.
Yeah. And, when it's all... What's to celebrate?
No, that's right. Yeah, and you know who came out? Glenn.
Yeah.
Yeah, because he knew.
Yeah. I think, and I like the fact that, and one good thing that came from it, you had a good officer that cared, that could understand that. There's not a celebration.
No.
I hope people, and we're being critical of the justice system or legal system, as you quite rightly say it. It's not perfect. There's failings, and we understand you need checks and balances. But we're talking about protecting kids, and kids should be protected. Yeah. And the rights of the accused, I fully understand that. I get it all. But again, look at the offence, and with the sentencing, like he came out on bail. What did he get sentenced?
So it was 3 years, 9 months. And 2.5 years with parole. So he was out on the 2.5 years,
I concede that, it's not much of a concession. It's obvious. Yeah. Judges have, they take a lot of things into consideration. They're smart people. Yeah. I just think the courts need to reflect, the courts are there to serve the community. People have heard the story of how one man's actions for his own, let's break it down, his own sexual gratification and the impact on how many lives he's harmed and how many lives he's what he's done is people are going to carry that for the rest of their lives. How much money has been spent on him? And 3.5, or what was it, 3 years?
2.5.
2.5.
Yeah.
Like, Yeah. I never, from a cop's point of view, I never bought into the actual sentencing.
Yeah.
But I would imagine with you, with everything you've been through, you've just described, the story you described was just getting to the end of the court matter.
Yeah.
And there's your 2.5 years.
Yeah.
There's your 3 years sentence. Your family's been sentenced.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. It was, look, and it was a bit heartening. And he did appeal his conviction, and he appealed it on the basis that Pip didn't answer all the questions. Yeah. There were 3 appeal judges, and I've seen the documents around that, and there was a little bit of hope for me, you know, as an everyday citizen, that they were quite professionally damning of some of the decisions that were made during the trial, including the fact that some of Rose's charges had been dropped. Yeah. Yeah, both before the trial and during the trial.
Yeah. Look, the courts are a complex matter. I suppose the one thing I take away from your experience is I didn't really appreciate how traumatic it is on the kids. When you break it down, you're living with them, you're raising them, and what they're going through at that age, and I can't even comprehend what would be going through their mind in this.
Well, even for Mags, like she was a star witness, you know. In the end, she was able to just get in there and say, and basically put him in the places where, you know, the other 2 had said. So, but it was 4 weeks. She waited 4 weeks for that.
You said you felt you didn't go well in the witness box. I feel pressure going in the witness box. I can't even comprehend what kids how.
Let me say, I didn't the first time round, so in that pre-trial, and unfortunately, they gave me too much time to read my statements for the main trial, because I could write it off by heart. So when they were saying, well, you said this, I was like, no, on page 4 I actually said that. So it was probably, you know, it was. I didn't realise that you had to memorise it like that.
That was an old skill that I was taught in detectives. We learned verbatim, and you couldn't refer to your statement, so you learn the whole of your evidence. But it shouldn't really come down to a memory test like that. No. Again, I don't like beating up on the legal system, because you need it, and you need the checks and balances, and I understand that. But I just hate seeing kids traumatised. Yeah. Let's move on. Something, if anything positive comes from this, and sadly it's come after your children, but setting up something that's going to change. And I just want to read, this is an article that's been written about the type of work that you've done. So, the Milthorpe's advocacy efforts were integral in expanding the Child Sexual Offences Evidence Program to every district court and police district in regional New South Wales in 2023. The program allows young people to pre-record their evidence, including examination, cross-examination and re-examination, in front of a judge and lawyers without a jury present. This is done in a timely manner, allowing victims to move more quickly into the healing part of their journey. You've contributed to that. It's pretty powerful. Do you want to break it down, what that actually means and what the improvements are?
Yeah, sure.
People don't have to go through what you and your daughters went through?
Yeah, that's it. And look, it was, so Glenn had actually mentioned during the trial that they were doing a pilot program. Yep. So kids were given what was called a witness intermediary. So somebody who would be there when they were giving their evidence to police. So breaking down some of those communication barriers. So I said earlier, you know, for Rose, she didn't even understand some of the things that were happening, the language and all that sort of thing. So the idea is that you're getting best evidence from the kids because they've got this person there who can help explain questions and those sorts of things. And then, so they're court appointed. Then what happens, so that's all recorded. Within 6 months of that statement happening, there's a court-appointed solicitor who will cross-examine the children with the witness intermediary part of that process again. And then they record that, and that is what is presented to court. So instead of kids going and spending 3, 4, 5 days on the stand, they're doing this instead. And, you know, for us, it was this no-brainer that you've got somebody there who can help the kids participate equitably in the process because they've got their language needs being met. They can move into that, as I said, the survivor state more quickly because, you know, they're hanging in this victimhood, you know, for a number of years, as it turned out.
And feeling the pressure of having to provide the evidence at court.
That's it. And then they can kind of move on. And the thing is that it's been independently reviewed a couple of times now. And the review process has said that both sides of the law, so, you know, prosecutors and defenders, have said that it is not breaching the rights of the perpetrator to a fair trial. Yeah. And so, you know, it was this no-brainer that was happening in Sydney and Newcastle.
Yeah.
So it came out to Australia in 2015. It was reviewed in 2018, and in 2018 they said it would be expanded across the state, and it wasn't. And I was watching, and it wasn't expanded. And so I had been writing letters to the Attorney General a number of times. Every school holidays was my, you know, letter writing time. And, you know, we got up to 2022 and I was still getting the exact same letter back from them. Oh, we're very sorry that this has happened. Yeah. We have this and this in process. I'm saying, well, I'm telling you that doesn't work. And, you know, with no intention of it to be expanded. So the girls wanted to do a fundraiser. So Rose wanted to do it. She wanted to ride around Australia. I don't know how much it was altruistic or whether she just wanted to get out of school. Like it's still, the jury's out. Okay. But she wanted to raise money for Brave Hearts, the child sexual assault advocacy group. And so she wanted to do that. And I said, well, if you're going to do that and you wanted to raise some awareness about something, what would you do? And the two of them were sitting together at the time and they both said, court is shit. Yeah. Both of them. And so we talked about this program and said, this is something that could be available. Do you think that would have helped? Yeah. And the girl said yes. And I said, well, why don't we raise awareness for that? But then I had that moment where, Rose she was 13, turning 14 at the time. And I thought she can't. You know, I looked into the legal side of it and I'm thinking she can't tell her story. Yeah. So when I told her that, she was pretty pissed off. And then I wrote some emails and I was emailing different organisations trying to find out more about the legal side of it. I emailed Nina Fennell. Yeah,
previous guest on the podcast. Very impressive lady.
Yeah, she's amazing. And knew she'd been involved in the Let Us Speak campaign. So I just emailed her. I did not expect to get anything back from her. Yeah. But in my email I said, this is us, this is what's happened. There's a solution. This is a solution. And they're not doing it. Anyway, probably an hour later, I got an email back, can I give you a call? Yeah. And then this thing started. So we went through it and we talked. I said, and I had seen our local member at the time, Justin Clancy in Albury, and he was really supportive of trying to get a petition through Parliament so that they would have to debate it. But you need 20,000 signatures. Yeah. And it just wasn't happening quick enough for me and or for any of us. And the petition was that the child sexual assault evidence scheme is extended to include all children in regional New South Wales because it wasn't right. Anyway, so Nina got on board and we started talking. Something that she said to me that's always stuck with me is she said the process of telling the story needs to be better than the story. Yeah. And the way that she cared for our children and our family is exceptional. She is just an amazing survivor advocate and I just think she's exceptional. And she, so the story came out, the Justice Shouldn't Hurt campaign was born. Yeah. I think the first day after the girls launched their story, and it wasn't that easy, like we had to go through court and you know, fortunately, News Corp helped us with that so that Rose could tell her story. Yeah. And she did write a really powerful letter to the court and she did say, I had a man telling me for a long time that I wasn't allowed to talk and I wasn't allowed to tell my story.
Yeah.
Then I went to court and I had men standing in front of me telling me that I had to tell my story. And now you're telling me that I'm allowed to tell my story again. And so...
Sometimes it needs the clarity of a young mind to break down what this is about. How do you argue against the logic of a child making those statements?
Yeah. And so they did. They told the story. And that first day, we got 25,000 signatures, I think, on the first day. It was 69,000 by the end of the year. So it launched in the November. And then on the 1st of February, we came up to Sydney and Dominic Perrottet at the time, he announced bipartisan agreement that it would be expanded across New South Wales. So $64.3 million was promised to have witness intermediaries available in every court in New South Wales.
Wow.
Yeah.
And just the way that you explained it just seems like a no-brainer too, doesn't it? How...
That was what people said. So anyone that was commenting, and, we were a little bit worried about, some of the things that would come out. And again, the majority of people are amazing and speak really, it's a no-brainer. I reckon that was said so many times. It's a no-brainer. Why are they not doing this?
Yeah.
And when we did, have a meeting with the Premier at the time, he had lots of kids.
Yeah.
And you could see he was, as a dad, was actually disappointed that he didn't know about it. And Brent, he was like, you don't know what you don't know. And it doesn't matter where you are or what you do. Like, even as a police officer, there'd be people in the police that don't know the process.
I share, as I said, I was involved in these type of investigations. But, hearing it firsthand from someone like yourself and relaying what your children went through and understanding it, you look at it and go, what sort of society are we that we re-traumatise children in this way? So, and firstly, congratulate your girls and Nina and everyone else involved in the campaign. What an important change that's been made to help people so they don't have to go through what you and your daughters went through.
Yeah. And, Nina's sort of now doing more advocacy in that space too, with the next sort of wave of justice shouldn't hurt, as you've heard. And I think, it's so important.
Nina Fennell, a power source.
Yeah.
I walked away after she was sitting in that chair that you're sitting in after having her on the podcast, and I was just amazed at how strong and passionate she was and how articulate she could explain things. So, you teamed up with a good person there.
Yeah, no, she was fabulous.
And the flow-on effect too. And there's one thing I wanted to mention it in part one, but I didn't. But the type of impact it has on your girls when they're victims of child sexual abuse like that, even the way that they looked at or reacted around their grandfathers or other men within your family, and the whole, it steals away some of their childhood, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
Being victims of that type of abuse. Yeah,
it does. But I think I contacted a group, Vocal, Victims of Crime Advocacy League. They're based out of Newcastle. I got in contact with a lady from there. I can't remember her name, and I wish I could, because she was very... she said to me, you go from victim to survivor, and then you survive, and then you thrive, and then you thrive, and then you inspire.
Yeah, that's not a bad way of putting it, is it?
Yeah, and I've seen them move through that.
Yeah.
And again, like, they are kids and they do have messy rooms, and sometimes they're, really, really upset me.
Do you want me to give a shout out here? Tell them to tidy their rooms?
Yes, please. But, the majority of the time they are living really good lives. Yeah. Some people think that because we've done this advocacy work that we are living in this space.
Yeah.
This is not a place that we ever thought we would be.
Yeah.
It annoys me when people say it. The thing is that you can't know something and then in good conscience not do something about it if you've got the capacity.
Yeah.
And we could, so we did.
Yeah.
My kids have mostly good days.
Yeah.
I watch Rose, as a nearly 16-and-a-half-year-old, riding different waves of her journey because her understanding has changed over time about what happened and, what that means. And, that's been an interesting journey to watch. But most days are good.
Yeah.
That's the reality. Most days are good. We've had people step up in our life, and we've had people step out, and that's okay. Because I think when you are passionate about something and it's right, then you've just got to do it.
You made a comment earlier on that sometimes you got to scream the loudest to get things done, and I think what you articulated there is that you've experienced it. You had the capacity, you had the energy, you had the passion, you had the ability to make a difference, and I think the world is a better place when people like you step up. But the thing that I've seen about you in our communications is that you're not going through life as a victim. You're making a difference, and you can still laugh, and you come in here, you can laugh, you can cry, but you're still experiencing life. But I think the kids have been fortunate to have someone like yourself and Brent they're supporting them, and it looks like you've got through this or getting through it, I should say, as a family.
Yeah. Oh, look, I don't get it right all the time. I can tell you that.
Yeah.
I don't. But I don't.
No, that's what Brent was saying.
Why would you give someone like that more power?
Yeah. I like your attitude.
Yeah. I've deliberately chosen not to hate because that's a really strong emotion that takes a lot of energy.
Yeah.
I don't think I can forgive, but I can be indifferent.
Indifference are very powerful.
Yeah, and I think that's what I need to do.
Yeah.
My kids, Rose is very forgiving, because she's if you don't forgive, you don't grow type person, and I love that about her. But she won't forget. Everyone's on a different journey, but we all have made a really deliberate choice to live a good life.
Well, that's I don't want to use the word revenge, but that's the way that you're insignificant. It's put in the past. Now you've got some other things that you're working on too. Glutton for punishment. Are you looking at running for Parliament?
I am. Yeah. Someone
Okay.
said to me today at the airport, a parent of an ex-student, he said, "Oh, what are you up to?" I said, "Oh, I've decided to run for Parliament." He goes, "Oh, you're doing local government?" "Oh, no, I went straight to the top."
Yeah.
Anyway, he's like, "What are you doing?" He said, "We live in Farah." I was like, "Yeah, we do." Anyway, so look, there was a tweet that somebody put out last year that was really not nice and didn't reflect me as a person or anybody that I knew, and was really unrelatable. And I just look at federal politics at the moment and go, there's no teachers in there, there's no police in there. There are, but they were a really long time ago. There's no regular people who want to just make sure that people are thriving, and regional communities get overlooked. They do, and regional equity is a real issue. And this, the Justice Shouldn't Hurt campaign, and seeing what we had to do to get justice, it was glaringly obvious that there's things that are missed out on because of our regional location, and we live in a city. So for people further out west and in more remote areas, they're missing out on things, and I don't think that's fair.
Yeah, well, that's fair
Yeah.
enough. Now, going into politics, well, you've shown that you've got the energy, and you've got the capacity and a sense of justice. So I don't think that's a bad starting point in the politics. And I take on board what you're saying, that people in touch with what goes on in communities from a regional point of view, but also teaching. And there's a lot, and we're going off track a little bit here, but so much in the media at the moment about youth crime and different things and the way to deal with youth crime. I've always thought on law and order issues, put money into education, because I think education can do so much good, pointing people in the right direction. And if you do get in politics, this is just a theory, so you can take this one in too. We want to get tough on crime. Let's look at how much crime emanates from child sexual abuse.
Yep.
Let's look at how many people are in prison because they were abused and as children and have ended up in prison. So how do we really fight crime? Well, let's fight something that causes a lot of crime. And it's not a theory. It's the statistics are out there. It's ridiculous.
Yeah,
it's ridiculous, and we've got to look at things like that. But anyway, what's the seat you're running for?
So Farah.
Yep.
So it's 126,000 square kilometres.
Yep. Okay.
Yep.
A bit
Runs
of travelling for you.
just east of Albury, Jinjallic sort of, and then all the way to South Australian border.
Yeah.
Up through Griffith and places like that, Deniliquin.
Okay.
Yeah. So. Yeah.
I know the areas. I've been down
Yeah.
in my policing days and different things
Yes.
down that way. So, look, good luck to you.
Thank you.
And I want to say too, not just thanks for coming on the podcast. That's a given, but the fact that you have made a difference in the justice system, and it takes people taking a stand, and what your daughters have stood up to. And I said to you, I'm not sure if I said it on the podcast, but I'll say it. I know I said it to you off mic. The way that your girls are presenting themselves, like full credit to them. You should be proud of them.
I am.
Yeah.
I am. Yeah.
Oh, good
Thanks.
stuff.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Cheers.